Never try to make deals with the devil. I don't know how many hours I sat in the poorly lit room trying to explain I wasn't a murderer. The officers try to appear kind by offering snacks or coffee in exchange for me telling them everything. I hadn't slept nearly for 2 days and my head started to pound. I pleaded again, my hands strained at the cuffs that kept them together. I told you, again and again, that I didn't know the victim and I didn't know the group I met with beforehand. I saw some of their posts on a thread discussing mutual interests and saw they were locals. I said, my voice sounding as tired as I felt. A message board for people who are into ghosts, right? Listen, you had no blood on your hands, but you were picked up at a location of a mutilated body. If it was the others who killed him, why won't you tell us? Did they pick him out for a reason? Maybe because of his name, Stan Smith? Stan is a good name, you know. Name my son that. The detective said, then trailed off for a second before getting back on topic. With everything we found, it looked like you guys were doing a ritual, he said, nerves also getting to him. I've been speaking with this man for hours. His partner left the room for a break and I hoped I can get through to him in some way. He said his name was Boss. I found myself rubbing my temple trying to keep a migraine away. We were doing a ritual, one that went horribly wrong. I should have never met up with those people. I wanted to have a fun time over the weekend. I assumed the group wanted a party, but they were all really into any kind of mystic activities. I figured to get the fun stuff I would show them a fun little party trick. My head ached away. I should have called my lawyer, though he would just make this whole thing worse. You won't believe me. What happened to that man was an accident, I started. A boss leaned in, which put me on guard. He was expecting me to finally admit to a reasonable explanation as to why a man was dead when there wasn't one. We were doing a ritual. Summoning Satan and other demons is pretty easy, you know. They want to be summoned, so they don't make it hard. In fact, you can find most of the materials to do so in any household cupboard. I rambled on, hoping to keep his attention. Boss leaned back in the chair disappointed. The hard plastic chairs caused him as much pain as myself. Whoever designed this room did a good job. The cold gray walls felt as if they were closing in. The other men didn't believe what I was saying, but it didn't stop me from talking. He hoped I might slip up and say something useful if I went on. But it's easy to get that summoning wrong. A simple mistake in common ingredients or slip of the tongue will be enough to cause accidents. I needed to stop. My mind flashed back to what happened last night. My entire body turned cold by the memory. It should have been a simple summoning. I wanted to bring forward the lesser demon that only wanted to have fun instead of taking your soul. But someone got cocky and pushed me aside, trying to bring forth Satan instead. By the time I recovered, he had already said the words causing our downfall and killing an innocent man. We didn't have enough power in the summoning for such a powerful request, so yeah, we got Stan instead. At least, most of them. Too bad the coffee and shits from the vending machine turned my stomach. I needed to cover my mouth to keep it all down. I don't believe in all that stuff, you know, seeing and believing and all that, Boss said, crossing his arms over his white chest. I wanted to be mad at him, but felt tired to do so. He looked exhausted and frustrated. I almost felt bad for him. He was stuck in a room with a person making crazy claims. I don't blame him for not believing me. Unless you were in the know with magic, it wasn't something people accepted lightly. This guy just wanted to go home to his family and bed. I looked at the brickwork, trying to make some way out of this. I needed a lie that would pin the blame on the others but also stand up in court. Then an idea came to me. My attention went back to Boss, so quickly that he moved back into his chair slightly. If I showed you, would you believe me? I asked, voice shaking. What do you mean? He asked slowly. I needed to steady my hands. A ball of excitement startled in my stomach. I pushed down. This might work out for me after all. If we did a ritual, if I showed you how magic works, would you believe me? I offered, pinning all my hopes on that single suggestion. He frowned, shaking his head, but I saw it, a hint of acceptance towards the idea. He didn't want to believe what I said was true. He wanted to prove I was crazy by letting me fail a ritual. If it doesn't work, I'll say whatever you want me to. I'll sign any statement, I don't care. I just need a few things, all of which are harmless. So, what do you say? I asked, leaning forward. He didn't like the crazy look in my eye, but couldn't pass up easily closing a case. He shrugged and told me to write down what we needed. Most of the things might already be in the police station. He just needed to go to a grocery store for a handful of items, but there were a few that stayed open all night. With the written list, he left me alone, saying he would be back shortly. I suppressed a smile. I finally had a way out. What most people don't understand is that Satan isn't really a bad guy. Evil yet reasonable. I never spoken with the big guy, but I knew a person who did. In exchange for his soul, my mentor became successful in any field he worked in. He knew he would go to hell at the end of his life, but became smitten with the devil himself and almost looked forward to the idea. I could have easily summoned him and made a deal for my freedom. It wasn't as if I would be going to heaven anyway. Didn't save myself for marriage and a bunch of other little sins a certain other big guy would frown upon. I wondered if Boss might become collateral damage. That would suck. I didn't overly dislike the guy. He was only doing his job. Boss came back sooner than expected with the requested items in hand, along with the notepad to write down my confession. He was positive I would be making one. I wanted to tell him this wasn't going to turn out well for him, but I decided against it. I looked over what he brought along, surprised by how fast he got the items. I took them from the shared kitchen. It was all there, he said, standing in the corner of the room. I pushed aside the table to make room for a circle of salt in the middle of the floor. The cuffs made the process uncomfortable, but I pushed through. Soon I'll be a free man walking out of this damn room. Boss watched from the corner, making it clear that I was crazy. I stayed on my knees, saying what words I needed to be careful not to make any slip-ups. With complex summoning words, it was easy to make a single deadly mistake. Aside from the tongue twisters, the rest of the setup was easy. Some salt here, some offers there, and a drop of blood I got from biting my finger. I knew what was coming, so I stayed on the ground. The lights overhead started to darken as I spoke to, causing the other men to start and doubt what he was seeing. Soon the ground under us rumbled as heat started to flood the room. I felt the sweat start on my forehead. A pull came from my chest and the circle on the ground. Something was wrong. This whole thing was off, but I couldn't figure out what might be. I used the right materials and said the right words. What could be wrong? I refused to stop, finishing up what I needed to say, and waited with the held breath. The rumbling stopped and the lights came back on. Nothing else had happened for a second, making me think I failed. When I summoned what appeared in the middle of the circle, I knew I failed, but in a way, I never wanted to see it again. A body appeared a few inches above the circle and dropped down hard on the cement floor. I gasped, head dizzy from the sight and the smell of what was in front of us. Unlike poor Stan, whom we killed through our careless actions, this body looked far too small. At first I prayed it was an animal. After I saw a bloody leg wearing a footsie pajama sticking out from the twisted gore, I knew what had happened. I wanted to be sick. My mind internally screamed at the horror of what I'd just done. I killed a child. But this should have not happened. I collapsed, my face breaking the circle. In the middle of my panic and dread, I tasted something sweet. The realization of how this mistake happened caused me to sit up. I stared at the box I poured salt from, the blank box. One that could have easily held sugar if no one thought to check when someone was packing inside of it. My head slowly turned, my eyes landing on the other man in the room. His eyes were so wide, I thought that they might pop out. A weight came down on my stomach when another realization came. Boz recognized a detail about this body. It took every ounce of my power to ask a very simple question. What did you say your son's name was? I said in a voice very weak. Boz looked down in my direction slowly, his mouth open for a scream that never came. In fact, he never made another sound again. That sigh was enough to make his mind snap. I finally thought I heard a deep, dark laugh. It might have been in my imagination, but I would like to think that the big guy saw this as hilarious. Regardless of making a deal with him, I was always destined to spend the rest of eternity under his thumb. And honestly, I deserved it.